Wednesday, Tuesday? Tuesday, September 16th, 2025. Call this meeting to order. We're going to take roll call. Nicholas Acevedo? Absent. All right. Virginia's here. Dennis Baker is excused. Curtis Black? Here. Hey, Curtis. Jim Carlson is excused. Annie is excused. Susan's here. How you doing? Chuck Ebner is excused. I'm here. Rita Goldberg. Hi, Rita. Arlene's here. David Gooder. Here. Hey, David. Lynn Hackman's excused. Laird Hayes is going to be late. Ruth is here. Scott Laidlaw. All right. Hey, Scott. Katie Love. Absent. Tony is here. Thomas Mang. Hey, Thomas. Jim Mosier. Hey, Jim. Amber Snyder. Hey. All right. Debbie Stevens. Okay. Christy Walker. Here. Okay, thank you. And Paul's here. Okay. Katie's right there. Katie, where? Okay, just walking in. All righty. So let's see here. Any public comments on non-agenda items? Oh, I do. Yes, please.
All right, this is Arlene, and you all received a card for Art in the Park, which is going to be held this Saturday. Art in the Park is an event hosted by the Newport Beach Arts Foundation, and it supports the Arts Commission programming, Concerts on the Green, the Sculpture Garden exhibition, the Pacific Symphony more recently in the Lobby Gallery. And we hope that you'll come out and join us on Saturday. The board will be there, and 120 artists with over 300 works of art and artisans. It's a fun day, good way to also purchase art, start your Christmas shopping. We will have refreshments, a pavilion that will be serving wine and beer for purchase, and food that will be provided by El Fogata. And it promises to be a nice day, fun for everyone. Mark Wood and the Parrot Heads will be there. We'll have a little bit of Margaritaville to celebrate the end of the summer. So it should be a fun day. I hope you all come out and join us. And you'll be supporting the City Arts Commission and the artists by doing so. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Arlene. Okay, seeing no further public comments.
Wait. One
please, yes.
I thought of it with the Save the Tree thing. Has anyone considered, and perhaps this could fall under arts, that if the tree were to be taken down for the fire station and library to be built, that it is processed, kilned, and we could make maybe a community table with it, or friendship benches out where the kids play, or in some sort of memoriam for the tree that will probably have to go away, but it could live on within the park and the little building there. So I don't know who you passed that on to. It was just a thought.
Thank you, GPAC member Walker, for that comment. Just for everyone's reference, that's related to a fire station #1 replacement project on the peninsula. It's actually going to the Planning Commission for a component of it is going to the Planning Commission for consideration this Thursday, in case you're interested in that. But since you referenced it, I'm happy to pass that along to city staff. Thanks.
Oh, hang on.
Yeah, Christy. The Board of Library Trustees met last evening, and they meet the third Monday, I believe, of each month. But I would suggest you talk to Melissa Hartson, who's our Director of Library Services, and maybe ask that be added to the agenda for next month's meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Great idea. Love that. Okay, seeing no further public comments, let's move to current business. Item Section 4, subsection A, meeting minutes. So we need to make a motion to approve, obviously with Jim Mosier's changes.
So moved.
Okay. Arlene moves. We have a second. Okay. Virginia, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All abstain since I was absent. Excused absence, by the way. All right. Okay. Subsection B, draft land use element. This is attachment 2. if folks want to take a look at that. I'm trying to see what page number that's on. Page 13 starting. Okay, and I'm going to turn that over to you to address it. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Co-Chair Evans, and just wanted to commend you all for being here, especially at an earlier start time, and I appreciate that. And just wanted to start by referencing the narrative in the agenda. It's really great that the subcommittee was able to meet 3 times to review various components of the land use element. As you can see by attachment 2, it's the longest element that you'll be reviewing, and there's a lot in there. However, I think what's important to point out is that the city's current land use element has a lot of good foundation. So a lot of this is a refresh. You'll see several of the policies talk about being adapted from an existing policy. There are some new policies which we'll try to highlight as part of this presentation. The subcommittee received about a 40-slide presentation, so we've cut that down to 39 for you this evening. I'm kidding. We cut it down to about 13, so we'll try to keep it brief. I did want to have Janet Rodriguez from DUDEC, who was the lead on this element from the technical side, provide a brief introductory part of the presentation, and then I'll kind of take it from there when we start talking about policies. And then I'll hand it over to Subcommittee Chair DeSantis, along with any subcommittee members and GPAC members for discussion from there. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Janet.
Thanks, Ben. Good evening, everyone. Again, Janet Rodriguez with DUDEC. So I wanted to provide you all with a brief update of what the adopted and the proposed element, what the differences are. So as you can see on the screen, we really worked to streamline the new land use element. The adopted element is about 70 pages of text, and we've cut it down to approximately 35 pages. We also cut down on redundant policies that could apply citywide. And we created a framework for the application of development capacity limits, since that was currently not thoroughly explained and created some confusion in implementing the land use element. And then the last thing I wanted to point out was that we also streamlined the way that policies are organized. So as you can see on the screen, we have about 6 different topics, which includes the development capacity limits, defining neighborhood and land use characteristics, and so on. And so that's how the policies are organized today. Next slide. I also wanted to give you all an overview of how we incorporated community input throughout this process. So we have some examples of some of the input that we received through the focus meetings. I believe it was earlier this year. And so if there was an existing policy, then we didn't have any additional edits. But if there wasn't an existing policy addressing it, then we drafted them. We either drafted new policies or revised existing policies where we felt that that input could be embedded into. Next slide. And so here we have some example policies of that are new or were adapted. So as you can see from the top, one of the feedback items that we received was about having a priority for first responder housing. And so that is what the first policy is addressing. And then we also heard a lot about maybe increasing opportunities for shared parking. And so that's addressed through the new policy LU 12.4. But as you can see, this is adapted from policy LU 6.16.4, which is an existing policy. And then lastly, you'll see a new policy related to community serving uses. Next slide. Okay, Ben, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Janet. I appreciate that introduction. So just wanted to start with this slide to, again, emphasize the subcommittee met 3 times. They were very in-depth discussions surrounding these 5 different topic areas that we're kind of dove into deeper. So I'm going to try to distill this into, again, a shorter segment of slides for you all. But as you can see in the draft element that's attached to the agenda, the red lines are directly responsive to the subcommittee member comments that were provided. I'm going to highlight some of those as we go through. Sorry, I got 2 screens I'm going to deal with here. So the first one is dealing with development capacity limits. One big change there that was suggested and kind of supported by city staff as well as a subcommittee eventually was allowing administrative updates to the 3 tables in the land use element, and that's really to the city, if you didn't already know, has a very complicated development structure. It's a very specialized, unique area that has multiple planned community documents. There's a specific plan. There's potential for more specific plans. There's different planned communities that have their own transfer of development policies in place, like the North Newport Center planned community, for example. So this would not allow staff to do administrative general plan amendments. It's really just if a transfer of development rights happens across properties within a statistical area, city staff could update the tracking in real time. And we think that's a really good practice because it provides transparency for the community to understand what development limits are actually out there versus requiring a general plan amendment to update a development limit. This is a very confusing policy to describe, but I want to make it clear that this is really under the premise of transparency, real-time data that is accurate for both interested community members and prospective developers as well as property owners. All right, defining neighborhood and land use characteristics. So some of these were refreshed, some of them were new, but really looking to encourage updates to new and adherence to current specific plans. The adherence is a reference to trigger me to talk about, for example, in the subcommittee member Walker talked about the equestrian trail and amenities in the Baywood Knolls area. Did I get it right? Say hi. Bayview Heights. I'm so sorry. As I said, complicated development pattern. So there's a specific reference there to the equestrian trails in the Santa Ana Heights specific plan, which is how the code references that area. So we're making sure to keep our specific plans up to date while ensuring that they are being carried out to the fullest extent. And then furthermore, providing guidance to city staff to ensure that we are coordinating across departments to make sure that there are adequate infrastructure improvements for the different specific plan areas or development areas planned for the city. Again, this is a very high-level overview, so I'm trying to keep it that way. So objective design standards to distinguish neighborhoods. The city already adopted recently a multi-unit objective design standards, kind of in accordance with what the state law's best practices are, but this would support those standards as well as any specific standards that are necessary to distinguish villages and neighborhoods throughout the city. One that's really, I like this one, is publicly accessible open space. So in our objective design standards for multi-unit residential development, we have requirement thresholds to require larger residential projects to include an easement on the property that's publicly accessible. We've already seen it sort of come through in some design proposals. For example, there's a townhome project actually on the Planning Commission's agenda this Thursday. They're planning in West Newport Mesa on Monrovia and 16th Street to develop a townhome community where there's some tilt-up industrial buildings today. They're proposing an easement that effectively extends and expands the public pedestrian sidewalk along 16th Street, which I think is a great amenity and something that kind of enhances the area and makes it a little bit better from the public's perspective. Same thing with ground floor treatment, so making sure that ground floors of mixed-use development encourage and foster pedestrian activity. Specifically, that's catered towards areas where mixed-use development is planned. Last one here, all of these Series 9 policies are actually directly related to the industrial areas, with some new housing contemplated in the industrial area, as well as a potential shift away from some industrial uses. It's important to make sure that we are encouraging higher quality design in that area where the public realm, again, is sort of lackluster. The sidewalks may be narrow. It might not be very vibrant with resident serving uses. So all of these policies serve to ensure that as that area redevelops, we're supporting the current industrial uses, but we're also accommodating reinvigoration of that area. Okay, now moving into accommodating planned housing and opportunities. So this really focuses on ensuring we have balanced communities for the focus areas that are contemplated through the 6th cycle housing element update. So a lot of these subtitles that I've put up here translate or correlate mostly directly to a focus area in the housing element. I put Mariner's Mile up here because that is an opportunity for change as identified in the current land use element. It's also got some 5th cycle housing sites on it. I also put it up there because it was very important to subcommittee member Jim Carlson. He provided some direct input that shaped the vision and policy, again, just based on his working knowledge of living and working in the area. West Newport and West Coast Highway, looking to remove some outdated references to like the Orange Coast River Park and some other things that just didn't make sense or resonate with the subcommittee. And then I think one of the higher priority ones on here is the airport area, which has direct policy support to create a specific plan which will more comprehensively review the inclusion of housing as villages with residential supporting commercial and park space, while also including an encouragement to revisit the bicycle master plan and maybe extend some of the improvements into the airport area. As more residential comes online there, it's maybe expected that people will be biking to their offices in the area, so it seems to make sense. Just continue on that same line, Newport Center. So really acknowledging that there is a good civic presence here now with the Civic Center and the City Hall in the area, as well as the police station, fire station. But really continue on the great vision and early planning of Irvine Company for the overall area, making it a special place through signage and some public art opportunities, while also looking to ensure that there's more pedestrian paths and some parks. And while we have a park here, it'd be nice to get maybe some park space or open, publicly accessible open space in Newport Center proper. West Newport Mesa, a lot of that is talking about enhancing connectivity to Randall Preserve and what's planned there, while also, again, improving the pedestrian experience. This dovetails nicely with the industrial policies I spoke about earlier. Coyote Canyon, really that one is laying the framework to support a high-quality planning document to encourage the developer of that site to provide a balanced community while being sensitive to the fact it's on a closed landfill, while also making sure that they are providing great connectivity to existing trails in the area and not losing the chance to create some special open space. Dover Westcliff, this one talks a lot about, again, a balanced community, kind of respecting the fact it's near Lower Castaways, Upper Castaways, and Upper Newport Back Bay. This one also got some direct feedback from the subcommittee to include a reference to the Environmental Nature Center and supporting family-oriented uses. So that did get into the policy and uses the Environmental Nature Center as an example of a family-oriented use that should be supported in that area. Okay, guiding future change. So again, I think infrastructure was a key concern for subcommittee members and making sure that while the city does have planned housing development, we want to make sure that we have adequate sewer, water, utility capacity to make sure we're not burdening the rest of the community with these new developments. So a lot of policy to support city staff working with each other, working with agencies to create infrastructure plans that are sound and comprehensive and cohesive with all existing plans and planned development. Let's see. The 24 series policies are new and basically provide policy support for us as city staff to ensure that we are evaluating our permitting and land use management system, to fancy way of saying that we are efficiently and promptly processing building permits, planning permits, all the permits that come through the city. We recognize here we pride ourselves on a platinum level customer service, and we want to make sure that we have the policy support to continue doing so, whether it's through revising our software or providing new processes. Let's see. So this, the 5 series allows us to adapt for the future. So as we've seen, although not so much in Orange County and especially not in this market, some vacant office may be worthwhile evaluating the economic impact of converting it to a more viable use. So there's policy support for that. I know that early on, Committee member Laidlaw provided a notion of adaptive reuse, and maybe we look at encouraging adaptive reuse through incentives. LU 25 series is a lot about parking and mobility, so that does talk about continually evaluating the city's parking requirements, looking at the economic impacts of parking, providing flexible parking types, and increasing access through the city's trolley program, which has been contemplated to extend to other areas of the city, including places like Croix del Mar. Let's see, interagency coordination. So this one, a lot of the updates are related to the Randall Preserve as the sphere of influence for the city. Today's land use element talks a lot about Banning Ranch, but that's going to go away because no one really refers to it as Banning Ranch these days. It's better known as Randall Preserve, so a lot of the updates are there to support that. One notable policy change is to coordinate with the County of Orange to incorporate the Newport Coast as part of the city's local coastal program. In case you didn't know, a lot of Newport Coast is actually in the coastal zone, but the county currently administers their coastal development permits because they've retained that permitting jurisdiction until the city takes it into our plan, and that's something that we want policy support for. On that one? It's kind of the county's taken the helm. We have met collectively with Coastal Commission staff, so it's in process. But not currently. So that's my very brief distilled down overview. So I just want to share recommended next steps before we continue the discussion. But we'd be looking to hear from the chair as well as subcommittee members and then discuss and provide your input, including any revisions. Much like we've done with the other elements, we're really looking for you to consider voting to support this element moving forward to the steering committee for concurrence, again, as a draft. And then ultimately we'd be looking to introduce it to the Planning Commission as an initial draft on October 9th. And that would be very much how we've done with all the other elements. We're trying to, again, continue the conversation, share out the elements for public review in draft form to get more eyes and more input. So I would like to go ahead and have Susan address the committee now, if that's okay. Mr. Co-Chair, Mrs. Co-Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So I wanted to really reinforce some of the things that you've heard already from Janet and from Ben. But first, to thank all the members of the Land Use Subcommittee for participating in the subcommittee discussions, and to thank the staff and the consultant for the support that they've provided to us throughout this process. One thing I would emphasize is we didn't start out, which you know, with a blank slate. We had the 2006 general plan found as a foundation to work from, but we also had updated housing element as well as the housing element implementation, the overlay implementation plan to work with. In addition to that, we had the earlier work that had been done by the consultants on the background reports, and we had the vision statement. So it was important to us to take a look at the vision statement and to ensure that the work that we were doing on the land use element was consistent with it as we were looking towards implementing the vision for 2050 for the city. So that really provided the foundation and the backbone for the land use element in addition to the other work that had been done earlier. So we did spend some time on that and confirm that, in fact, the key elements of the vision are reflected in the land use element, and that things like environmental stewardship and coastal protection, for example, are basically taking the vision's call to preserve our natural resources for future generations into consideration as we were working through the various proposed policies, the new ones. So are also the area of balanced growth, for example, and how this new general plan and the housing element implementation are calling for a change in terms of the policy to be able to accommodate the additional growth that will be occurring within the different target areas that have been identified in the housing element, and also the need for a more diverse form of housing, which also would be part of the additional growth that takes place within those target areas. So that was important to us in our discussions. We also looked at some of the assumptions that were in the background reports that had been prepared by the consultant team and staff that looked at how Newport Beach is going to will be changing demographically, for example, as we see our residents aging, and that we will be hopefully bringing in some younger families and so forth through the workforce housing opportunities that we hope to be making available. So in all instances, we looked at the existing policies in the 2006 general plan as a starting point, and then we identified the key areas where the existing policy would be changing, and I think that both Janet and Ben have talked about those, so I'm not going to go into any depth on those. But I wanted you to know that that's where we really focused on the new policy areas that would be added to the existing foundation in the 2006 general plan, and that's what the subcommittee focused on. And I think one of the things that we determined with this new format for the general plan is that we didn't want to have a lot of detail in the general plan itself. And so for the land use element, there are a lot of areas that are still to be determined that are going to be part of the implementation plan that is going to be prepared. And that I'll ask Ben to go into a little detail in terms of when that will happen. We tried to put some definition when we could into the land use element that would provide some detail, but more work will be done in a corollary document, which is the implementation plan, that will be moving forward at a later date. So I'm going to stop at that point, Ben, and turn it back to you and for the discussion with the committee and the land use committee members, as well as the general plan update committee.
Thank you, Susan. Any comments? Yes, please.
I just want to commend the committee. I think you did. Thank you. I think the committee did a fabulous job in creating this plan. It, as a mother of 3 millennials, young adults, I could tell you that the next generation, the emerging generation that we would like to attract, values walk score as a metric for quality of life, and incorporating mixed use and pedestrian connectivity and just, just integrating commercial with residential answers the call to what I can obviously tell you the next generation is looking for when they look for quality of life. So I think you did a great job, and thank you.
Well said. I agree. Paul, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, when Susan was talking about aging residents, she was looking directly at me, and I don't know. There's some other gray hairs, Susan. Come on now. I think that the committee did a wonderful job. I think very comprehensive and just a wonderful job. I took a look at the work product. I probably should have volunteered to be on the committee, but I didn't, on the subcommittee, and I didn't. But I just had a couple of thoughts that I can break into a couple of areas, although I had some minor comments throughout the text. One has to do with a group called Santa Ana Country Club. In 2008, the city annexed in what I guess is referred to as the Pegasus Tract over in West Santa Ana Heights off Santa Ana Avenue. That tract contains the new city animal shelter, as we all know. Across Santa Ana Avenue is Santa Ana Country Club. It's a club that was founded in 1901, has 400 regular members. It's a private club. And it started out in Peters Canyon, then in 1911 went to what is now the Taylor Woodrow property on the Upper Castaways for about 10 years. It had a clubhouse that turned into the Castaways restaurant, burned down in 1956, by the way, for anybody that's interested. So in 1922, the club went to its present location on Newport Boulevard. The club is in the unincorporated area of Orange County. Its sphere of influence is controlled by the city of Costa Mesa. In the year 2002, the city of Costa Mesa wanted to annex the club into Costa Mesa. There were a number of us, members of the club and others, who circulated a petition to South of Mesa Drive properties as well as the club, and we were able to defeat that annexation effort. The Newport Beach, the 400 members were primarily, the lion's share of them are members, are residents of Newport Beach, so that's where we thought we belonged. So since 2002, well, since 2008, really, it's been pretty quiet in the annexation effort. So what I've suggested here, and again, I apologize for not being part of the subcommittee. I could have brought this up a lot earlier. I wanted to add, and I think I've done that in my comments on handwritten page 34 and 37. What I've simply suggested is that we have a placeholder for the next 30 years, that if the opportunity presents itself, meaning that maybe City of Costa Mesa would release its sphere hold, that the City of Newport Beach, without being obligated to do so, may consider annexing the club into Newport. At one time, there was a vote of 6-1 in favor of going forward, but the city did not want to get crossways with Costa Mesa. I don't blame them. But if the opportunity presents itself sometime in the future, I would like to have a goal and policy that would be added to this good work by the committee, by the subcommittee, that would at least allow the city to consider the possibility of annexing Santa Ana Country Club into Newport Beach and taking the steps necessary, if everybody wants to do that, to effectuate that. So again, it's a placeholder. There's no obligations. It's just that way. So I'm sure Dudek could come up with good language if the group wants to head in that direction. I've come up with a little language on that page 34 and 37 of my handwritten comments, but there's no pride of authorship. The other thing I think I've mentioned in the past is at my page 9, and it has to do with the good idea to allow beach access and harbor access to the public. I think that's important. But I think I've mentioned in past discussions that there are really two exercises, public exercises on the ocean front where we live, honestly or candidly. From 36th Street down to the pier, in fact, beyond the pier and down to the Wedge, there's a boardwalk, as you know, and it attracts pedestrians and runners and skateboarders and bicyclists and that kind of thing, and it's a very active area of the ocean front. From 36th Street down to the river jetty, we don't have the boardwalk, and that provides a kind of a more family experience, a quieter, a more passive, a less active area. And so I've lived there 44 years, we've seen so many families, there are people engagement parties and different things that happen down there that don't happen on the other end of the beach. So my change at page 9 was simply to say, without extending the boardwalk, which terminates at 36th Street, encourage the expansion and improvement of access to the waterfront, blah, blah, blah. I'm not wedded to that. I just think it reflects, frankly, what many of the folks in the city have always thought was important, to have two beach experiences. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Anybody else? Please. Actually, I think, Susan, did you want to go next? Okay. All right, please.
So the numbers aren't the same that I read on my computer as far as the pages. And I had two questions on this ADU. It is suggesting that it would be able to count that in our housing. We're trying to get affordable housing, that we'd be able to get that. But my understanding from listening to the city council meetings, way back last year, where they were saying that the state commission or whatever wouldn't allow us to count the ADUs. Am I incorrect? Did that change?
They do allow us to count ADU production, so it's very helpful.
Didn't make any sense, but yeah, I thought that was one of their big complaints. Okay, good. And then the other thing, as I was reading this, it does seem like there was areas like the Newport Coast and Randall Preserve, that there was eyes on it to include it into Newport Beach, to annex them. Is that what the intention is?
So for Newport Coast is already Newport Beach, but as I mentioned earlier, there's the local coastal program. Well,
there's just too many people.
The part that's crossing wires is there's an annexation agreement for Newport Coast, right, where basically the city does not take over permitting jurisdiction until a residential tract is fully constructed. Right? So that sort of has happened over time. The city mostly has permitting authority over most of Newport Coast. However, the coastal jurisdiction remains with the county. So the reference that you see in there for Newport Coast is simply encouraging city staff to work with the county to take over the coastal permitting authority, which I think a lot of people in that area would see as a good thing. Because they only work with the city of Newport Beach. They don't have to go to the county for conflicting permitting requirements. So that's what that reference is. And then Randall Preserve, formerly Banning Ranch, is in the city's sphere of influence, and it has always been something that could be annexed into the city. So that was carried forward sort of as currently couched in the land use element today. So that's not really changing.
Okay, but I thought when I was reading it, there was a paragraph, which I can't seem to find now, that it said that they would consider building structures like residence there, which I don't believe is in the design anymore, and I was surprised to see it. I don't know, I can't seem to find it. I'll try to look at it and send it back to you, but I'm pretty sure that Randall Preserve will not have residents on it.
What you may be referring to is the tables that were included. They do have a development intensity associated with it. That's currently allowed today, and that's what council has not provided direction on removing. However, I'm glad you bring this up because as part of the land use subcommittee, it was a recommendation to city council to remove former Banning Ranch from consideration for any sort of development intensity. So that's not something that is folded into the land use element right now. However, we look to council for direction on that as a separate recommendation from the land use subcommittee.
Well, we are doing this looking at 2050, and that should be erased out of this general plan. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it was struck because nothing can be built there because of who bought it and where the funding came from. So that did get redlined out.
Well, there is the land use table 2, I think it is, talks about development limits, and the current development limit for Randall Preserve or Banning Ranch is carried forward. So if you look in the land use table 2, and I think that's something where we have to figure out, does that get incorporated into the land use element prior to going to city council, or is that a separate recommendation to city council that maybe comes through a bi-monthly report? I'm not sure how to do that. But as it stands today, we've left the density in that's currently standing in the land use element for the Banning Ranch property. Do you see that? There is, but again, council has not directed to remove that, so it was left in. Once council directs to remove, then we'd take it off.
In fact, an earlier council absolutely denied when it was requested to remove it. They said no, they wanted to leave it in, even though it was not going to be developed, and the state said it wouldn't be developed.
That's right.
May I? Thank you, sir. As usual, I want to affirm some excellent and thoughtful comments, verbal and written, by Mr. Watkins. Thank you for that. And I do think the comments about the boardwalk and extending, I think whether it be that area or other areas, things like that could really make a change in the experience for the people that live in that area. I would caution that that's not something that we do unless forced by the state. I just think that's not a good idea. And then, excuse me, on the handwritten page 14, Mr. Watkins had put under the section that says gated communities on page handwritten 14, and he wrote why. And as somebody who lives in a gated community, if I think about other communities that aren't gated and they wanted to gate their own community, why would we say we would want to discourage that? So that kind of jumps out at me. And then in the section below it, allowing rebuilding, my guess is this is just kind of some of the language that is used by the consultant that is complements kind of the state themes. But once again, if we don't need to use equitable, that's a trigger word. I would request that to be removed. And then on...
I just want to, I think that at least in the coastal zone, the coastal commission's come out very strongly that you cannot do a gated community, but that may have been changed, but that was at one point, there were several agencies that were working against gated communities, so that may be why it ended up in here.
So yeah,
maybe there should be clarification as to.
Okay.
To add on to that, yes, in the city's local coastal program, there's direct discouragement or prohibition of gates
Throughout the city or just certain
in
zones?
the coastal zone.
In the
I think
coastal
that's
zone.
to Nancy's point. That's why this is in the general
Got it.
plan for consistency's sake.
Thank you. And then on handwritten page 32, the top of the page, I realize, and I've looked it up through the state, I realize that environmental justice is required to be addressed in the plan by state mandate. Also, in reading that, it wants to make sure that equal access to various, okay, so it's really addressing, it's wanting to have a city address underserved communities who may be unfairly impacted by pollution and things like that. And given our demographics, I think that's a little bit less applicable. I would argue that our demographic that is probably the most vulnerable to environmental impact is our older community of any race, doesn't matter. But I would love to see if DUDEC could answer this, but could we comply with a state mandate by using a term like healthy environment for all or something like that?
Can you clarify what policy you're looking at?
Environmental justice. So I'm going from, can you find the printed page? I'm looking at Paul's handwritten page.
I think it was 33.
Thank you. So it's in the spirit of kind of the tug of war between Sacramento and the city, but we want to be compliant, obviously. We can't ignore that topic. I'm just wondering if it could be softened in its terminology, that's all.
Sure, we can take a look at that. So can you remind me what's the specific text that you would like to be softened?
When I went to AI for some alternative terms, because I couldn't think of them myself, the one that seemed the softest was healthy environment for all. All is everyone. Next softest was environmental fairness. I still bristle at that, but environmental justice is really a bristling term to me. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So if there's a way we can be compliant by softening it, I would encourage us to do that. So that's all I had.
Environmentally friendly?
I have a comment
Please.
on Paul's, on his handwritten page 10, land use 2.8 oil and gas facilities. I don't think, and this is something I would hope that the committee would at least address. He says that to prohibit the construction of unreasonably intrusive new offshore oil processing, and I don't think that's what was meant. I think that the original intent was just to say we don't want any more that can have oil leaks or anything, not just the fact that they don't look good, but that's up to the committee to decide. But before that was incorporated, I thought that should be something that the committee might want to discuss.
Thanks, Nancy. Paul, please.
Yeah, I agree with Ruth, 99 and 44, 100% of the time. But I'm pretty sure that the doggone government code or whoever controls the listing of the elements that are necessary for a general plan uses the word environmental justice. So I'm not sure how we avoid mentioning it and then softening it after the title, because somebody's probably going to look at and say, hey, where's that environmental justice? And we've agreed not to have a separate element for environmental justice, but to weave it in, right?
That's the question.
So I think just to satisfy the folks in Sacramento, maybe we have to say environmental justice, but then soften it after the colon.
Spoken like a true lawyer. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Scott, please.
I just want to float something out there. So I very much like the sort of the mixed use verbiage that's under the Cannery Village. It's a short little paragraph, but it's good. And also similar length on page 43. And you'll see what I'm getting at. And also under Balboa Village. And I feel like it should also be incorporated into Corona Del Mar. And for some reason, it seems completely missing there. And I think that's a very vibrant, commercial corridor. Currently, housing above commercial is not allowed in the zone, but I think I would propose that we encourage that as a future option to increase the viability of the street and the commercial center. And so some of the language that you see under Cannery and Balboa Village could be a simple statement. I would propose inserting that into the CDM section. Yes. Yeah, in the commercial corridor, not in the residential neighborhood, just in the commercial corridor, which is it's only 1 block deep, right? I just been trying for years to get stuff approved, and it's very difficult, but it seems the ones that do get approved are successful. So I would just, and then one other thing about the gated community, if the city owns the roads, that's a very huge impediment. So that's why the gated communities are developed at the very beginning, and those are private roads. But it's very difficult to go into a community that's public roads owned by you and I, and then put gates up. So, yeah.
Thank you, Scott. That clarification is helpful too. So as somebody who has family members on the south side of PCH in CDM, there's a lot of residents down there that are already ready to go with pitchforks about potentially commercial corridor changes. So I like the idea of mentioning it. It is needing some vibrancy down there. There's a lot of ugly old buildings, etc. But anything that is considered the residents down there, all they think of is if you're not requiring extra parking somewhere, they're all going to be parking in front of my house. And our community is already taken over all summer with people who leave their trash everywhere and worse. And now what are you going to do to our residential streets? So that's the rift, is I think everybody wants to see the commercial corridor more vibrant, but then how do you make that work with the people that live right around PCH?
Okay, if I can jump in as well. Part of the issue, and I'm not against mixed use, or Ruth, obviously, I hear a lot of what you're saying. We have a study going on right now on the commercial corridor, and to me, by putting it in right now, you are already, what do you want to call it, prejudicing that study. And I would like to see that study go first. And whatever comes from that, then you come back and you modify what's going on here. So not against it, and I think there are some parcels that they're looking at for that kind of mixed-use stuff, but I think it needs, that study needs to go forward before we add it to this. And that would be where I come out on that. Thank you. That is a really good question, and we just said, Ben, do you know, we just sent an email out on, there's an upcoming study, I think, sometime, or a meeting on it in the next few weeks or 3 weeks.
Yes, I'm glad the conversation organically got here, because I agree. I think the commercial corridor study is ongoing, and the findings are still being sorted out, and the key recommendations are still being finalized and vetted with the community and business operators and business property owners in the area. I believe there's going to be another community sort of open house event happening next month with an eventual city council study session planned for potentially November. So there's going to be more conversations coming up soon. So if you've got strong opinions about things, or you want to inform those who might have strong opinions about it, I'd advise you to check in with city staff. Liz Westmoreland or Jocelyn Perez are the planners who are working on that effort, and they're very responsive and happy to help however they can. But I would say it'd be a little premature potentially to put something so overt about mixed use in this area where it's not currently allowed. And I also worry about the CEQA impacts. Current document is being prepared based on minimal to no land use changes, rather refinements on existing policies. So I don't want to stifle that conversation, and perhaps if the committee would like, we could work something in about, continue to study opportunities for change in Corona del Mar or something to that effect. I'm just throwing it out there. If there's something you want to incorporate in there, maybe that's an option.
Tony, please.
Thanks. But East Coast Highway there is already commercial. So I don't think the plan would be to abandon the commercial. We're just looking to add residential above, so enhancing that mixed use.
And that's one small piece of the study. A lot of it's surrounding parking supply management. There's also consideration of incentivizing and encouraging some uses over others. A lot of people don't like well, sure, that I was gonna say banks, but you can go there. Banks,
Tennis shoe and smoking accessories.
well, certain stores
pawn
that don't
shops.
add to the vibrancy of the
Maybe
area.
we bring the landmark back, huh? Yeah.
So is there an intention, though, to complete that study before this exercise gets completed and then somehow incorporate findings from that study into the general plan?
I'd say it sort of remains to be seen. I mean, we won't know more until it goes forward in October, November. And then maybe there's an opportunity to dovetail, but it might be most appropriate to let this proceed and then come back and revise once finalized.
Real quick, Kurt, and then we'll come to Virginia.
I have a question first that maybe will lead into a comment. And I was not on the subcommittee, but looking through the corridors, first of all, having lived in a few of them, I thought the work there was really good. I lived in Cannery Village for a while and love that it's kind of mentioned here and there's some mention of mixed use. I also lived on Balboa Island for a while, which is kind of a unique neighborhood, and I didn't see it mentioned and was wondering like where, if that should be explicitly called out or if I'm missing it. Oh, so okay, that's looped in with Balboa Village. I could be wrong, but context-wise, I think of Balboa Village as being the village across the ferry on the peninsula.
Two different beats.
Yeah, and so I don't think of that as being Balboa Island. And so my thought was, should we explicitly mention Balboa Island?
Yes.
Good point.
Yes.
Virginia,
Okay.
please.
Okay, I'd like to remind us that we are doing the general plan as looking forward to 2050. And I think that maybe if there was a way to kind of have a heading to this idea of mixed use and what do you call it? Having residents above the shops, as part of like looking at this as a potential for wherever it could be, reasonably placed. And that way it would be like an overall umbrella, and then people can fight it out over the next 25 years. But I think that I don't know, I guess, I don't mind that we don't extend the fairway in front of all the houses. I don't mind that either. But I just think that when we're talking about trying to get affordable housing, which I don't see how we're ever going to do this if we only want to put in $1.5 million homes and townhouses, I think that this is another possibility for working people that have a shop to live above it. So, or some other way. But I just think that we shouldn't give up on it when maybe it'll be something that'll really work out well eventually if you fix the parking problem, a parking structure or something else that would be put in there to solve the problem overall. But we have to talk about this as if what'll happen by 2050.
Thanks, Virginia. Kurt, did you have anything else?
Yeah,
Please.
I was just going to add, I think given my understanding of Balboa Village being different than Balboa Island, I think it would be helpful to have a perspective on Balboa Island, just because I know, having been a former resident there are some unique issues around visitors in the summer, around holidays, which some of that is great, but there can be major parking challenges associated. And it is unique in that there's obviously a walkway around the island. Many people, including myself, really, really like that access. But also there's consideration. I know they're raising the wall. Like that's going to be an expensive project. But it's a unique community, so we'd like to see that represented.
Thank you. Good points. Okay. Please, Katie.
So I see parking scattered throughout here, and I understand why it's scattered. But some of the things that have come up here, parking keeps coming up. So I live on 72nd Street on the south side, so parking is horrific during the summer. And so we keep talking about all, environmental concerns and all this type of stuff, but I can tell you that we could eliminate a huge amount of pollution if there was a way to stop the driving up and down the street for 45 minutes to an hour and a half, waiting for some, and then idling and revving your car and all this type of stuff. And to be fair, part of that just is that it irritates me and disrupts my life. But part of it is true, like the smell, the front of my house is filled with soot because of that. So there's something coming off, right? And I think that the reality is that if we really want to look at, if we really want to plan this properly, the reality is that using beachfront areas, beach accessible areas as parking lots, instead of looking at ways to build parking structures in less desirable places and having more transportation to bring people down. So, and we have this at the hospital. Like right now, I have employees that have to show up for work an hour before they start because they can't, I don't have any parking, and I have no way to get, there's no public transportation mostly, like not reasonable. I just think that parking really needs to be looked at in a significant way because it affects everything. It affects mixed use, it affects residences, it affects businesses, it affects everything. I get home from work, if I can't ride my bike, I'm not going. People go, oh, you want to be here? It's too far, I can't ride my bike, I'm not going. And I have a garage, it's just that I don't want to be out there, right? So like on Paul's, on page 32, he says, curbside parking, evaluate, what does this mean? Raising prices to discourage parking? It's a good point. I just think that parking really needs to be an integral part of this because the reality is in Newport Beach, parking is an integral part of everything.
Perhaps there could be a policy of suggesting that the city explore more means of communicating, particularly in terms of beach traffic. I mean, it does you no good, I live in Cronin-MR, when you get to the end of Marguerite, it says it's lots full. Well, and it doesn't say all the streets are full. Well, with the apps nowadays, certainly we should be able to start to develop something where you could learn when you're starting off, hey, no sense coming down to Newport today because everything's taken, try Huntington Beach or whatever. So maybe a policy that encourage using technology or something to improve information about parking availability, and that might be working.
Unfortunately, the politics in the state aren't supporting parking. I mean, the politics in the state are supporting less parking. So, I mean, you can build apartment buildings today with no parking. So, as much as I support that, particularly in the CDM area where I'm at, I think parking, like those condominiums that were built right below whatever it is, Giamellas or Santoros, that came out really nice. I think we need more of that, and it'll change the face of our retail along that CDM village because we got crap retail.
Can I ask a question, Ben? With the parking thing in mind, I live down on the peninsula across from B Street Park, and that gets filled up, and then someone parks in the turnaround, and then you got this big line coming back. So yeah, it's an issue, big time. And I think the app idea is great. But do we not have, when developers want to build X amount of square feet or X amount of units or X amount of storefronts, how much parking they must provide for that development, a new build? They do. And what about for commercial? Like Malarkey's took off, that section to have the outdoor thing, which is a fabulous space, but then he doesn't have that many parking spaces. So
I would say yes, there are parking requirements. There are also requests to adjust those parking requirements, and those are all done by way of a discretionary action, case-by-case level of appropriateness. But the challenge is this is an older community, not in the sense of aging population, but we've been around for a while as Newport Beach, and back when it first started developing, parking wasn't really a thing either. So unfortunately, that's part of the problem citywide. We don't have the luxury of being Ladera Ranch. Everything is parked to the T, but here you kind of have to work with what you have. So I think to your point, a lot of the policy in the land use element supports identifying solutions based on the constraints we have. I mean, yes, we could build parking structures in places and figure out how to best use that. But I think, talking about evaluating pricing of curbside parking, it's really allowing the city to look at curbside management. Are we discouraging people by having prices too high? Are we, it's like, how do we, but that's kind of my thing is I think the vagueness gives us the tools to regulate the parking. And to Chair Gardner's point, there's definitely opportunity to include something in here about using best available technology to manage parking, because I think that that's a great addition, including something about messaging, letting people know, hey, parking on the peninsula is very scarce right now, like you might want to consider turning around. Maybe that does deter some, maybe it doesn't. So we can do the best we can. I think that the policy framework here does support city staff looking at creative solutions, short of, retroactively requiring parking for every single thing, which would mean no economic development in the city, and that's part of the balance.
Thank you, Ben. Please, Rita.
We don't have a subcommittee that has worked on congestion in this plan, do we? That has examined it?
I mean, I think that's folding into land use element and circulation element, which was not part of this evaluation, but I think we could spend a lot of time talking about parking problems in the city.
But I think more importantly, maybe recommending more buses be purchased by Newport Beach that give people an alternative option to getting down to the beach, or creating an elevated bike lane so that it's a straight shot without the hazard or safety issues of trying to navigate the roads. I mean, there might be other options to look at that would have the side benefit of mitigating the parking issues.
So I guess to that end, land use policy 25.6 talks about increasing access. So it supports increasing the Balboa Peninsula trolley, which is a much nicer bus that the city would offer to the desirable areas. I think that's a viable opportunity. There's also mention of the bicycle master plan, which I don't think it contemplates elevated bike lanes. Maybe it does, but it does really encourage the use of bikes as alternative transportation. So I think there are good tools already in place to manage parking, and through this, we are looking to sort of enhance the existing tools we already have. So that's where I think adding the emerging technology is a really good idea. I'll say that again because I like it. So.
I also heard recently that there was talk about an expansion of the trolley system. So, I mean, that'll help. I'll take it.
Like all the villages. So it's no longer the Balboa
Take it to Rochester.
trolley. It's going to maybe be called the Newport trolley. And then we can go to CDM, drop off at the island, not on the island. Things like that. They are discussing expanding it past summer.
Okay.
For the record, Christy Walker, GPAC member, validated co-chair Evans' comments about the trolley expanding. Thank you.
Mr. Mosier, please.
Commenting on some of the topics that have come up at the very beginning, Ben mentioned, I think the first policy was ministerial, which means staff changing numbers in the general plan. I understand now the motivation for that, and I think it's probably a good idea, but should the policy mention that when staff changes a number from what we think the council approved in the general plan, that will be footnoted or linked to something so that the public will recognize that that is a modified number and what the basis of the modification was, rather than just changing numbers willy-nilly, where perhaps that needs to be mentioned a little bit in the policy itself, that it will be a trackable, recognizable change. And going back to Paul's comment about the annexation of the Santa Ana Country Club, I think he made a very brief allusion to there is another unincorporated area very close to that, which is a substantial residential area. I think he referred to it as the south of Mesa residential. For those of you who know the area near the intersection of Irvine and Mesa where the Irvine Ranch Market is. There's a substantial unincorporated area there. And I think he was alluding to that the residents there would probably rather be part of Newport Beach than Costa Mesa. And so should those two be, if they're addressed at all, should they both be mentioned? And then as to the boardwalk, Paul is concerned about a policy addressing extension of the boardwalk towards the Santa Ana River jetty. I guess they're not represented here, but I think there are residents at Peninsula Point at the opposite end of the peninsula who have equal concerns about the boardwalk being extended in front of their homes. So it seems perhaps both of those should be addressed at the same time and not separately. We had the discussion about in the table of land use categories that we have a now obsolete category for the former Banning Ranch, which is the open space residential village category. I agree that probably needs to be, certainly for the Randall Preserve, the residential village is no longer part of that. One, this may be rather technical, and I don't know if anybody has approached Ben from the planning staff about this. There's a possibility that we need to add another land use category to that table of general plan land use categories. We're not seeing here the maps that go with this. There's a lot of allusions to maps that are not included. Those maps are showing where, for instance, residential property can go. And in the current plan, especially in Newport Coast, and also in some of the areas adjacent to Newport Coast, the current land use map has the lots where houses are actually supposed to be developed indicated as residentially designated. But there's also in the subdivision large areas that were planned to be what are called lettered lots. They're intended to be not for residential but development, but privately owned buffer space. And so when Dudek in the background report tried to add up all the residential properties we had, they came up with a too large number because it's including those that are not really ever intended for residential use. Tony is looking at this. It's like.
Are you speaking specifically of the open space area?
No.
Separate lots. That would be buffered areas that are owned by a single family residence.
These blank yellow areas around the subdivided parts, okay? Those I do not think were ever intended for residential development, yet that they're being indicated as if they were. So somebody literally looking at the general plan would say that is a residential lot. And so I think we're not thinking we have to make any changes to that, but perhaps we need a land use category for those.
And what would the recommendation for a land use category be?
I don't know, private open space buffer or something? I don't know. And then the areas in here have similar stuff. So, this is another tiny technical point. In the redlining on page 46 of the current agenda packet is a policy about Coyote Canyon that got deleted. The subcommittee recommended deleting this at the August 11th meeting, and it has to do how far the residential development has to be from the 73 toll road. And we did not understand at the time of the meeting what the origin of that was. And it turns out this is actually a mitigation measure in the housing element implementation EIR. So I don't know if staff is aware of that now. And if it is a required mitigation measure, whether we should be actually deleting it or including it here or what. But I think we thought it had to do with, it was a noise issue, and it turns out it's a mitigation for air pollution from the toll road. So somebody thinks you have to be at least 500 feet away from a toll road to avoid, to have livable residential air. So that might need to be rethought. And then I'm afraid about droning on, but the big point that I had at the subcommittee meeting, and is still a consideration to me, is that we have never quite reviewed how the current plan, how the proposed plan refers to our existing plan. The existing land use element has 187 policies in it, and in the revision we're looking at tonight, you'll see notations next to some of these saying they were copied over from the existing plan. But of the 187 that we currently have, there's about 83 that have no reference in here, so it's not clear that they were carried over. It was suggested if nobody brought up these topics, they must not be important, but it seems to me that nobody was informed that they were being taken out of the plan, and they might be important to them if they knew they were taking out. And I wanted to give one simple example of what I'm talking about, which is if you look on page 40 of the main agenda packet, you will see our policies for the old Newport Boulevard corridor. Okay. And if you look at the notations, you will see what we currently call land use goal 15 in the old current plan was land use policy 6. And the first policy priority uses was the first of those policies, 618.1. You'll see it skips over 18.2 and it copied 18.3 and it copied 18.4 and then it interpolated from a different section a policy that had not been there before about rebuilding non-conforming structures. So it seems in the 2006 general plan, people wanted that area to come into conformity and they didn't want this special leniency for those. I don't know if anybody has thoughtfully considered, do we want that leniency for old Newport Boulevard or do we want to clean it up? If we do want that leniency, then you look at the next policy for West Coast Highway, and you'll see we're not giving that leniency there. So why was one policy taken out? Why was one policy put in there but not in the next one? So I think this is very much a work in progress, and I can say what the policy that got taken out is. LU 15.1 priority uses was followed by a policy about discouraged uses. And the current general plan, I've lost the page now, but the uses that are discouraged on Old Newport Boulevard, we have the priority ones that we want here, supporting the hospital, professional offices, and the neighborhoods nearby. The ones we did not want in 2006 were highway-oriented retail uses to be discouraged and to prohibit heavy retail uses, including auto supply stores and auto repair stores. So was that a policy that we're consciously wanting to drop now, or why was that removed? So there's 83 policies like that that were in here before and are not in here now. Some of them are like in the airport area, it now calls for a specific plan, so a bunch of things that are replaced by that. But there's many like this that were taken out, and I don't know why. So I really think that needs a review of why existing policies that we had were taken out. Do we have a different vision for Old Newport Boulevard than we had before? Don't know. And the problem is there's so many policies, it's very hard at the subcommittee to review all of them. But I think it's an important point. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. Well, let's see here. I think we've heard from almost everybody. Some great comments. So what's the will of this group in terms of moving this towards a vote to put it in front of the steering committee, with obviously the comments that have been shared today, including Paul's comments? Yeah? No? So you want to come back to this? Okay. So I think that while you were set the way, I think the will of the group is that we would come back to this after making some of the changes that have been discussed. So not voting on to move it forward today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we have a vote to that effect?
Yeah.
And I guess in terms of timeline, this is tough because we have a lot lined up regarding the open house in October. Frankly, notwithstanding the comment about the why for every policy that has been changed or omitted, I think everything else is very easy to address and is something that we would be comfortable revising. Have made note of all the comments, and I think they're all very workable. Again, notwithstanding the comment about putting a through line to every single policy change, I don't know if Janet, if you want to add anything as to what sort of the thought process was, but my understanding is that a lot of the reduction in policies was due to streamlining, and if you have priority uses, maybe you don't need to put discouraging uses, and I think a lot of those have translated to zoning code changes already. So obviously, general plan is one thing. If you have a priority use, that's really what you're focusing on. And the zoning code really is the implementing vehicle that is already discouraging through requiring discretionary approvals or prohibiting outright. So I think where there was what we saw as maybe an unnecessary policy or something that could be inferred, that was removed. A lot of that too, as Mr. Mosier alluded to, was in the airport area. There was a very robust airport village sort of conceptual plan in the current land use element, and a lot of that is being sort of deferred to and called out for a specific plan, so that's part of the reduction too. So while I totally respect and we can produce something, I think Mr. Mosier has already produced a table of things that have been removed, and I think you might have it, Susan. But I would just tell you that I'm very comfortable with the feedback that has been given this evening, and I believe that we can make some very good changes based on what you provided, but ultimately it's at the discretion of the GPAC. So the question was how many legal nonconforming uses are on Old Newport Boulevard? I'm not sure offhand, but I do know that Old Newport Boulevard has been an area that has needed some enhancement. I think there's a lot of older, underutilized buildings, so part of the reason for putting that there, it's very similar to policies that we have in Corona Del Mar, and frankly, I'll go back and revisit our notes too, because I don't remember deliberately putting that in this particular segment, because that would translate to a code change as well. For example, in Corona Del Mar, and I forget where else, we have a similar policy where you can replace the building to its previous non-conforming square footage, and that is a benefit that encourages redevelopment. So while Old Newport was flagged as an area that could have some enhancement and change, I don't recall specifically that policy. So I appreciate it being flagged, and I can look into it.
Does that right to build back what was damaged by a casualty or fire extend only to?
No. To clarify, non-conforming chapter in the zoning code covers citywide regardless of area. But what this does is allows you to voluntarily remove a building and replace it with something to the same square footage. So that's kind of the intention.
Okay. Thanks for that, Tony. Please, Susan.
I would agree with Ben that the bulk of the comments that have been received today in this conversation can be addressed without delay in getting this moved forward in the next steps that need to be taken for review with the city committees and so forth. I think the changes can be made. I think that we can address Jim's comments based on the work that he has done, perhaps in a more simple way than delaying it until another meeting of this committee, the full committee. So
let's do this then. Let's put it to a vote. So we want to make a motion. Susan, you want to make a motion to move this to?
Kurt has a suggestion.
Kurt, please. Yes.
Before we vote, can I ask a process question? If we do move it forward, does it at some point come back for review here? What happens in that situation?
I'd have some thoughts on that, because I agree. We want to get those revisions right. I do think in order to sort of, sorry, the shade is attacking the tree back there. It's distracting me.
Was attacking me previously. So.
We want to get this right. And I think what it would do is it would allow this version to move forward to the steering committee, but we can make a lot of the revisions ahead of that and can share it back out to the General Plan Advisory Committee to review ahead of the steering committee meeting and present comments in that form. But ultimately, we could always bring it back. I think all we'd be looking for is concurrence to move this forward as a conversation continuing with the steering committee and then sharing it out with the planning commission. And we could even revise it between steering committee and the planning commission, frankly, before it ever goes out to the public for any sort of comments. But ultimately, it still remains in a draft form. I very much appreciate the Balboa Island comment, for example. I think the nexus there, just for context, since you asked about it, again, this is all based on current general plan land use element. I don't think Balboa Island was flagged as an area for potential change or enhancement, but I agree that there's been, parking issues, for example. How is parking managed with the commercial district on Balboa Island? Maybe there's some policy that could benefit from being put in there. So I agree that that's got to get right too.
I also think the residents of Balboa Island, my family has a house there that has been in the family for generations. I think Balboa Island's changed a lot since 2006. Mostly for the good, but I do think having it represented here would be a very positive thing. But the policies really do matter, and so that's like part of my hesitation is I would like to see them as someone who has a stake in what that corridor means to me and to many people who live there before we give it a stamp and bless this. But that can also happen in parallel with this going to the Planning Commission. So I kind of want to know process, next steps, and what happens if we move it forward.
Yeah, and I think your vote this evening would be that this is a good start. I see this element as a little different from the other elements in that it's, again, highly complicated. There's a lot to it and a lot of topics covered. So I think supporting this moving to steering committee would allow us to make some initial revisions and changes, and then would ultimately allow us to share with the Planning Commission. But again, through the open house process, and I think Chair Gardner has some thoughts, so maybe I'll conclude.
Well, I'm just thinking, Kimberly and I are both here. We've heard all the comments, so that if we do have this, if you do decide to move it forward and the steering committee looks at it and says, well, wait, you forgot this or something, then we can also add our own additions, not changing what you said, but say, oh, this was omitted, and bring that up in terms of before it's forwarded on to the Planning Commission. So that would be one more step, since we are both here and have been listening.
Great. Susan, you want to take a stab?
Yes, I would propose that we move the draft land use element forward to the steering committee and through the process there to the Planning Commission. Understanding that the proposed changes that have come through this committee would be addressed as part of that process before the element goes public.
Beautiful. I'll second that. We have a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We have 2. Okay. Tony and Katie. Anybody else? 3. Amber. Okay. All right. What's that? We just, what do you mean?
After the motion.
All right, we can go back then if you want to do that.
I understand.
I was just thinking because we just spent like an hour and a half talking.
I don't want to
about it, but
rediscuss the,
Right.
the actual document. I want to talk about the motion. So I want to make sure I understand the motion before I vote in favor of it. Are we recommending that this goes forward with revisions that we'll see before it moves forward? Like which of the revisions are being added to this?
My motion was that we that the staff and the consultants make the revisions that have been discussed here and where there is a consensus, and move it forward to the steering committee. So this committee would see it as it is moving forward in that process. So it would not come back to this committee for approval. You would have the ability to see it and be able to provide written comments if you don't feel that the revisions have been addressed sufficiently.
Kimberly, please.
I don't know if is this on? So is it possible to get, just procedurally, maybe a bullet point list of all of the comments when it's going to before the steering committee, and then we can, in that committee meeting, we can kind of check off what has and hasn't been based on the comments from this meeting?
So perhaps as part of the motion, we could include an itemized list of comments made and how they've been addressed, and that's something I'd be happy to prepare.
All right. And then the other aspect of the motion would be that you would be working with Jim Mosier to try to show the pathway on the various 2006 policies that may not be explicitly in the current draft.
Sure, and I'd also ask for clarification that the motion includes all of Committee Member Watkins' comments, including the boardwalk component as modified, and also encouragement on the annexation. Okay? Thank you.
All right. Do you accept that friendly amendment? All right. Please.
Yeah. I think I would like to make a substitute motion that we vote to send what we currently have to the steering committee for them to provide further direction to us, probably an additional meeting of the subcommittee, so that we will have a draft that we all know what we're forwarding to the Planning Commission for their review.
Well, procedurally, I guess we could vote on that motion. You have to be seconded, though. Tony, you want to second that? Any discussion on that before we vote? Yeah.
I guess I'd just like to know what the ramifications would be of doing that. You know, what does that do? Is that realistic? What does that do, timing, etc.?
Well, ultimately, this process is intended to be very respectful, responsive to the GPAC's needs and desires. So frankly, if you don't feel comfortable moving this forward to the steering committee for consideration, that's definitely your prerogative, and as staff will adapt and adjust. I think the biggest driver is, we have some community open house planned for October 21st, virtual open house planned for October 22nd. We were looking to hopefully have all of the draft elements out for public review by the time the open house comes around, to help provide more opportunity for people to learn about them and then provide some informed public comments. So that particular date is important for us to try to meet. However, again, if it is not the desire of the committee to move that forward this evening, we'll pivot. We'll figure it out. We always do.
procedural question there. So is it contingent that the document go to Planning Commission before it be shared at the open house? I would imagine that probably is a contingency, but I want to check on that.
Yeah, it's very important that we put out a draft to the responsible board, commission, or committee from the city, as we have been doing.
Got it.
And kind of moving into, you'll hear a little bit more about that in next steps. So I'll kind of save that discussion. But yeah, that's the intent.
Any further discussion before we vote on Mr. Mosier's motion?
Yeah, I wanted to clarify that the reason I'm not comfortable with the motion that was on the floor before that is it seemed to assign to me as an individual editing what is before us today, and I'm just not comfortable that I should be doing that because I might.
Would you be willing to withdraw
changes.
your motion if
No.
if we
no. The reason I'm uncomfortable is I don't think I should be making changes that the rest of the committee has not seen and may not agree with.
So I guess my point was if somebody else did that work and presented it, no?
I don't know that was that. Sorry, I don't want to
Okay.
jump in,
No,
but
go ahead.
I would say for Susan's motion, I don't think the intention was to have Mr. Mosier edit anything. It was more so for me to obtain the information that he's already prepared, which talks about existing policies that were not included, and review it and then maybe distribute to the committee for viewing. I don't think it was intended to do anything more than that, unless I'm wrong. So
Yes, that's correct. Sorry, Jim.
Mr. Mosier, thoughts?
Still seems to me we would be advancing something we don't know quite what we are advancing. So,
Okay.
if we're
No, we just need to vote on this, and depending on that, where that goes, we can take the next step. So we'll take a vote on Mr. Mosier's motion. All in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Motion fails. Okay, back to the original motion, which originally passed. Do we have any? I want to count again. Who voted against that motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Okay, so motion passes. Yes. Which I would not try to tackle to write that down, but that's pretty good. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mosier, for your comments. Everybody, we are going to move to subsection C, subcommittee reports. I'm going to give it back to you, Mr. Mosier, for your presentation on that.
Thank you, Chair Evans. I've probably said already more than I should say, but since I'm on the agenda, I am to give an update on the meeting of the Noise Element Subcommittee that we had yesterday morning. This was, I believe, our third meeting with the DUDEC noise consultant and our second since she was officially on board under a contract with the city. The purpose of the meeting was for her to present to us the results of the noise survey that they conducted and the resulting state-required noise contour maps and the revisions to those that show the impact of the traffic on the major roads. And the third was to show her proposed overhaul of the existing noise element policies. The first two of those were a little disappointing. Number one, the noise survey, instead of being a comprehensive survey of noise in Newport Beach today, was only for the purpose of validating that the traffic noise measurements were consistent with the traffic flow. And even more disappointing is the fact that that validation, after validating that you could correctly predict the noise from the traffic flow, it turned out that rather than getting a comprehensive set of new contours which the planners could use to flag properties in high noise areas, the consultant only analyzed the limited set of roadway segments that were in the housing element EIR, and where that subset of roads came from is not clear, but some of the major roads that we currently have noise contours for would not be in this. So the planners would be given a very incomplete set of contours based on this. So I do not know how that is going to be resolved, but presumably it will. Of the policy review, the main thing to highlight is that the consultant recommended 2 new policies addressing noise from construction at project sites, which had not, currently the noise element only suggested restricted hours for construction activity in our city, and essentially anything goes during those hours. And also we had no, I should clarify for those who don't understand, the vibration from construction activity is also regarded as a kind of noise. It's very low frequency noise. And we had no policy or standards regarding the allowable amounts of vibration generated by construction activity or to the amount of noise if it was during the allowed hours. So the 2 proposed policies that she suggested were one, a set of, and both of these, I should clarify, are policies and standards that would apply to the evaluation of major development projects, where the city staff is going through a CEQA evaluation of those. And she is recommending that the planners ensure that the vibration from the construction will be at levels that do not pose a risk of damage to adjacent structures, and different levels for different kinds of structures. Older residential would have a more stringent restriction than newer construction would have. So she's recommending that as a new policy for construction vibration like pile driving and heavy earth moving. And the second is in evaluating the projects as to the noise levels that they would produce. The proponent of the project would need to demonstrate to the planning staff that the construction would take place in a way that when averaged over a period of 8 hours, it would not exceed a certain noise level. And she is recommending a level of 80 decibels for that limit. And then the final policy thing that we discussed was, while those are fine for the evaluation of projects, how do we actually ensure when they happen that those promises will be met? And that needs to be addressed through something enforceable, which the general plan is not, something in our municipal code where we have noise ordinances. So at the general plan level, that would be addressed by a policy recommending and demanding, actually, that our noise policies be reevaluate our noise ordinance, of which there's more than one. The municipal code be reviewed at a minimum every 10 years to make sure that it's actually ensuring that that these promises at the general plan level will actually be met. And so residents, when they see them not being met, have an enforceable way of ensuring that they are. And so that was the essence of our meeting. And there were other policies that need work that we have not completed reviewing yet, so we're going to have at least one more meeting with the DUDEC consultant before the proposal comes back here.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. Well done. Awesome. Okay, let's see here. Let's move to item D, updates on deliverables, objectives, and schedule. Ben?
All right, so this is my last slide. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for sticking through, and those who left, they stuck it through long enough, so appreciate that. And wanted to commend Steering Committee Chair Gardner for the astute recommendation of starting the meeting earlier so we can all get out at a decent time. My wife just texted me and said my dog is growling at home in her crate, so I have that to deal with. At any rate, as you have now supported moving the element forward, we'll be taking the safety element, which was previously reviewed at your August meeting, as well as the land use element to the steering committee for review. As promised, the safety element will have the red line changes that resulted from the GPAC meeting. It will be shared out. I'll actually send that out directly to the subcommittee. Upcoming boards, commissions, and committees. One thing I touched on is, as Committee Member Black talked about, introducing to the boards, commissions, and committees. It has been a very deliberate and important approach to share with the board, commission, and committee prior to releasing for public review. So one thing you'll see on here, City Arts Commission, it was great to have Subcommittee Chair Arlene Greer in attendance, and also GPAC member Jim Mosier. Although I'll clarify, he was not commenting as a GPAC member. He did astutely point out that the historical resources element was not provided to the City Arts Commission. However, it just so happened that they only had 4 members in attendance, so I'll be coming back to their October meeting to present the arts and culture and historical resources element again, and then we'll be looking to release those elements for public review thereafter. Planning Commission, again, we're looking at that as a target date for the land use element and safety element. A very similar process, looking for their initial feedback and then sharing that out to the community for public review. Editorial review will happen for the land use element, safety element prior to release to the public. I don't know how many of you saw the information I sent out, but the recreation, harbor bay and beaches, and natural resources elements were all sort of stylized in the original branding from the original steering committee started in 2019. And those have been shared out to the community. I just checked in with Taylor from Cairns and West today. Since September 5th, we'd have 400 more visitors to the site, which I think is a pretty good uptick. And we've had 5 commenters to date, which I think is pretty good. Pretty good start. Well, from September 5th, and it's a general plan. I mean, we've seen this. But with that end, if you have interested people who are interested in natural resources, harbor bay and beaches, I did send out the communications kit to the GPAC. I know I'm working actively with CDMRA. I'm going to address, Karen sent me an email today, and I had Taylor already address some of that. So appreciate it. And we just look for y'all to sort of provide your outreach organically to your networks. Looking to still do the outreach and engagement open house in October on the 21st and 22nd. And think that's some exciting stuff to look forward to. So happy to take any questions. Of course, if you'd rather connect offline, happy to chat individually. But those are your next steps.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. Before we adjourn, are we, GPAC next meeting is what, October 7th? That first Tuesday?
First Wednesday? October 1st. Yeah, I think so. We'll have to see what business we have to conduct. I might end up looking to push it. I think the noise element is sort of the last remaining element to come back and introduce to the GPAC. So we'll need to continue working with Chair Mosier and the noise subcommittee. So I think for now we'll leave it as to be determined, and then we'll go from there. And I'll communicate with you all afterwards.
Okay. All right, everybody. Have a good evening. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.